December 4th, and that's when a majority of the 2025 class will put pen to paper. Today, I got the best recruiting insiders in the game. We got Steve Wiltfong sitting next to me. We got Chad Simmons over there on the wall. And in this video, we're going to give you everything that you need to know about the top available players in the 2025 cycle. We're also going to hit on some major flip targets that we're tracking between today and National Signing Day. Then we're going to debate who's going to finish number one overall in 2025. All right, let's introduce Chad Simmons, Director of Recruiting here at On3. There he is. Chad, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Like you said, 3 weeks away, man. It's going to fly, too. It's going to go fast.
Yeah. And to my right, we have Steve Wiltfong. Steve, welcome in.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. Let's get this thing going. Like I said, we're 3 weeks away from National Signing Day, and we're going to start the show by talking about the best available players in the country. Now, whether you're tuning in to recruiting year-round or if you've just tuned in, this is going to be a crash course in what's important in 2025. We'll start at the top. Number 2 defensive lineman in the country. We're going to start with Justice Terry, not Jaem Stewart. So we'll start in the middle. Justice Terry, though, number 2 ranked defensive lineman in America, number 7 overall. Chad, you've covered Justice Terry now for almost 3 years. Justice Terry going to make his decision probably on National Signing Day. What's the latest on Terry?
Yeah, to start with, not signing day, actually the 6th of December, the last day of the early signing period. So he'll go to be that last guy, probably the last one standing per se, Josh. I mean, he's a guy, obviously, coming off an OV to Texas here a few weeks ago. That might be his last visit of this process. I mean, he's going to start playing high school playoff games on Saturdays. And if they win, they play each Saturday the next 3 weekends. So their goal is to be state championship team. But going back to the very beginning, he was Georgia's first commit of this class, Josh. I think in the end, he becomes one of their last commits or signees for this class as well. He's an in-state kid at Manchester High School in South Georgia. You know, USC's been involved, Alabama and Auburn at different times. Miami's chipped away as well. But I think in the end, Georgia is in a great spot to get Terry back and keep him at home in this class.
All right, guys, this is live. And guess what happens sometimes when we're live? Things happen. And we have breaking news right now. 5-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham has flipped his commitment from Alabama. Yes, the 5-star wide receiver committed to Alabama is no longer. He has flipped his commitment to Ole Miss. And luckily, I got 2 insiders here with me. So we're going to break down this Caleb Cunningham flip. Now, Steve, I'll start with you. We've kind of projected this for a couple days. I shouldn't say weeks, but in recruiting, days sometimes feel like weeks. And coming off this Ole Miss visit, it seemed imminent that Caleb Cunningham was going to flip. You and Chad put your picks in Monday night. What was it that ultimately got Caleb Cunningham off of that commitment to Alabama?
Well, Ole Miss never went away. He did not take an official visit to Ole Miss in the summer, but he did take 3 game visits to Oxford this fall, and on each of his visits, he felt like a star. I mean, the community rallied around him, the autographs he signed, the pictures that he was in with young people. His brand, he felt at Ole Miss, was second to none. Then he loves the offense, the way Lane Kiffin and that staff, Charlie Weiss Jr., get the ball to their playmakers. It's a chance for him to make an impact early. Ole Miss with a top 20 recruiting class right now just landed one of their top targets on the board, Chad, and Caleb Cunningham.
Yeah, like you said, man, he can be that guy or the guy at Ole Miss. And I think it goes back, like Steve mentioned, 3 games. That middle game, I think, was extremely important. Oklahoma week, he was there. He went in town that Friday evening. He stayed through Sunday afternoon. He rode around with Lane Kiffin. He hung out with guys like Austin Simmons, Jackson Dart, multiple players. He felt at home in Oxford. And he can be, what he told me his quote was, a hometown hero at Ole Miss. He can go in there and be that DK Metcalf, that A.J. Brown, a kid that stays home, makes plays at the in-state school. He even compared himself to be that next, like Ryan Williams, stayed home at Alabama. Go be that guy, that Ryan Williams at Ole Miss and stay home.
As Ole Miss pushes for a top 15 recruiting class, Josh, on their way to maybe the college football playoff. They want to be playing in games of that magnitude for years to come. This is a recruiting class that can keep them playing at that level. They're in on some other potential flips moving forward. That starts with LSU offensive line commit Devin Harper. He was in Oxford over the weekend. There's some positive buzz about where the Rebels stand with Devin Harper. And then obviously Deuce Knight is the top target on the board right now for them. 5-star quarterback, currently committed to Auburn. I'm told that he's expected at Auburn the next 2 Saturdays, but Ole Miss, depending on Deuce's own schedule, hoping to get him back for the Egg Bowl, and they're going to continue recruiting him.
All right, I want to get your opinion on this, though. And now that Caleb Cunningham has flipped, I mean, that's if Ole Miss presses on Deuce Knight, does this Caleb Cunningham flip put them in much better position with Deuce as well?
Doesn't hurt. I mean, look, they were just there together for the Georgia game.
Right.
They hung out. They talked. At one time, Deuce was working even when he was committed to Notre Dame, working on Caleb to flip to Auburn before he was even public. They'll go the other way around now with Caleb working to flip Deuce from Auburn and keep him to stay home at Ole Miss. Look, there's no doubt. I think Deuce will make Auburn sweat a little bit between now and December 4th. There'll be communication with Ole Miss and that staff, and, of course, other commits as well. But definitely does not hurt, their chances here.
Go figure. 3 weeks before signing day, Lane Kiffin with a 5-star flip. Ole Miss fans, talk to us. Comment section below. How are we feeling about adding a 5-star wide receiver to this class? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, let's get back to it. Now, defensive lineman Jaem Stewart, the number 3 defensive lineman in America, the top 15 player overall. Boy, this recruitment, it's had me confused from the get-go because I've always thought LSU kind of was the favorite, but as this season wore on, there's 2 other teams, Chad, that seem to have risen to the top of Stewart's list.
Yeah, Steve and I talk a lot about Jaem, obviously, crossing notes and different sources, what we feel we hear. I mean, I think we're on the same page that we would probably go out of state over the in-state school right now, even though coming off a good, what I'm told, successful official visit to LSU. I think heading into that weekend, Oregon, Ohio State were the main 2. USC wants to make a move this coming weekend on the OV as well in Los Angeles. But for me, I like where Oregon still sits. I think a big thing for me to watch here is he's going back to Oregon on November 23rd when they don't even play a game. It's an off week. It's about business, that brand, those conversations, those final meetings. Ohio State, he loves Larry Johnson as well. But I think with Jaem right now, I still take the field over the in-state school, leading with Oregon right now for me.
I think with Jaem Stewart, you're talking about someone in this class that I think is going to bring one of the highest NIL values of any prospect in 2025. He's going to go out to Oregon on the 23rd and be able to talk business on his visit to LSU. I talked to Clyde Alexander, his trainer and mentor, and he said that Jaem had a chance to meet with some great people and have meaningful conversations during his official visit to LSU. Look, he's been to these programs many times. When he goes back to Ohio State for the Michigan game, he's been to games. He's been to camp at these places. He's worked with these coaches. He's talked scheme. He's talked position development with all these coaches. Now we're dotting I's and crossing T's at the end of the cycle with NIL, and I think Jaem Stewart is going to command a lot of dollars when all said and done with these schools all up against each other here down the stretch. And depending on who you talk to, you get a different. I think he's going to end up at Ohio State. I think he's going to end up at Oregon. No way Frank Wilson and LSU lose him in state. So we just know that he's going to announce sometime during the 3-day early signing period and enroll early at the school of his choice.
Yeah, right now it seems like it's easy to make a convincing argument that either of those 3 teams are going to land Jaem Stewart, and we're 3 weeks out from a decision, so we'll see what happens here. All right, the next top available 5-star athlete, Michael Terry III. He is the number 1 athlete in America. Steve, I'll let you handle this one. We talk a lot about Michael Terry III on this channel. There was a chance that he was going to make a decision before the season, but that didn't happen, and here we are.
Texas and Nebraska still battling for Michael Terry III out of San Antonio, Alamo Heights. I still like my on-3 RPM in favor of the Longhorns for Michael Terry. Talking to the family this week, but I do know that Nebraska is still very much alive. Matt Rule and Coach McGuire were recently down in San Antonio to see Michael Terry. So the Huskers push continues, but I think Texas is still the one to beat.
All right, defensive lineman Isaiah Campbell. We're going to come to you, Chad, on this one. He's the number 5 ranked defensive lineman in America, just outside 5-star status at number 42 overall, and he's decommitted from Clemson. That's about 5 or 6 weeks now. Isaiah Campbell, what's the latest on his recruitment?
Yeah, I like Tennessee's position right now. Took an OV there a few weeks ago. Had a great time in Knoxville with his family. Likes the staff. Josh Heupel, as a player's coach in his eyes. Rodney Garner, the D-line coach, very heavily involved as well. And Coach Chop, and the list goes on about how many guys are recruiting, Campbell for the University of Tennessee. He'll be at an in-state school this week at North Carolina for an OV. Mac Brown would love nothing more than to keep him at home, keep him in state. But I think they have some ground to make up. Can they do that? We'll have to wait and see what happens in Chapel Hill. But, this goes back with Tennessee. Even when he was committed to Clemson, he was still talking with Tennessee. He was initiating some contact with the coaching staff, and he has a real interest there in the Vols, and I like their position right now.
All right, yeah, I agree with you. I'm penciling him into Tennessee's class, but got to see how this visit to UNC goes this weekend. To you, Steve, on edge, Javian Hilson. We go from the number 42 overall prospect to number 43 in Javian Hilson. Hilson was a one-time Alabama commitment who decommitted, committed to FSU, decommitted in the beginning of their bad season, and now he's on the market. It seemed like Texas was the one to beat, but now, there's more teams involved.
Been a very fluid recruitment, as you mentioned there. Texas is the on-3 RPM favorite, but certainly Texas A&M making that very interesting down the stretch. Went and took a return visit to Syracuse earlier this month to spend time with Fram Brown and company. UCF has been in there battling for Javian Hilson as well. I still think it's more than likely he ends up in the Lone Star State as I talk to you today, but always be ready for a twist and turn in the recruitment of Javian Hilson.
All right, the last name on this list, linebacker Madden Faramo. He's the number 4 ranked linebacker in America, number 74 overall. Chad, what's the latest on his recruitment?
Well, if it was up to Madden, he would be committed like 3 months ago. I mean, that was the plan, to be committed before his senior season. He's a man with a plan, and if he wasn't ready, he wasn't going to rush it, and that's why he's still uncommitted now, and likely will take it into the end of this month or around the early signing period to make that decision. He was just back at Notre Dame. That has long been viewed as the team to beat for Faramo. He's all about that culture. He attends the J. Sarah Catholic School. He's a man of faith, and he puts a lot into that. Notre Dame offers him that off the field. Obviously, they have a lot of history on the field as a football player as well, but Notre Dame is doing a great job. Keep an eye on USC. He's a local kid in Southern California. He's been there for multiple games this year, expected back at the end of the month for the Notre Dame game. And then you still have Texas involved as well, but right now Notre Dame, USC are the main two at the top.
All right, so there you have it. Those are the top uncommitted available players. You guys interact with us. Let us know where you think some of these players are going to ultimately sign. Comment section below. All right, let's get into some flip talk. Now, we're going to start with number 1 quarterback, Bryce Underwood, because we have to. And he's coming off this big LSU visit. Bryce Underwood, number 1 quarterback, number 1 player overall. So let's talk about this recruitment. It's really 2 teams at this point. It's Michigan trying to make a late surge to flip the in-state quarterback, and then you got the team he's been committed to since January 6th, and that's LSU. Steve, we'll start with you on Bryce Underwood.
While talks have certainly intensified with Michigan here over the last month, communication between Bryce and head football coach Sharon Moore, his camp and the Michigan camp, I still sense there's a lot more confidence on the LSU side that he will stick with his pledge to the Tigers. He was there on his official visit this past weekend, got around the guys again, got around the coaching staff, brought several family members with him down to LSU, and talking to sources on both sides, I think there's a lot more confidence that he remains with LSU.
Chad, do you view Michigan's run here as serious or just something that Michigan coaching staff must do? I mean, there's no way they can let the number 1 player in America just leave the state uncontested, right?
No, they want it to be serious for sure. They want some more return dialogue and kind of keep that interest there. I mean, we've seen guys like before, Dante Moore leave the state. I mean, C.J. Carr leave the state. We've seen guys in the past, those top quarterbacks in Michigan, for whatever reason, choose not to go to the program in Ann Arbor. I'm on the same page with Steve here. 2 weeks ago, I had a feature called Calling My Shot, and I picked Bryce Underwood as a low confidence level to stay at LSU. That will be higher this week. So coming off that OV to LSU, I'm hearing a lot of the same things that Steve is right now, that we like their position better now for LSU to hang on here for Bryce Underwood.
Michigan is much more equipped in the NIL department for high school recruits than they were when Dante Moore was going through his process and ultimately rode with UCLA at the very end as the Bruins ended up swinging the biggest stick in that one. But he's at Oregon now. The returns on Dante Moore at Oregon are strong. He's their future under center after Dylan Gabriel exhausts his eligibility at the end of the season. Michigan, there was talks that they would maybe sign 2 quarterbacks in this cycle as it is. They had Carter Smith committed, and then they wanted Bryce Underwood. Keep an eye on Brady Hart there in the 2026 class as a guy that maybe could potentially reclassify to 2025, which could also help. But 2 quarterbacks for Michigan has never been out of the question as they try and restock that quarterback room that was seriously depleted when J.J. McCarthy moved on to the NFL.
What's LSU done right in this recruitment?
Well, I think it first and foremost starts with the relationship with Joe Sloan. I don't know if there's an offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach in the country that does a better job of building meaningful relationships and trust with top quarterback recruits. And then just with Bryce Underwood and LSU in general, he always had an affinity for that program. Even before he was heavily recruited, he had an eye on LSU. He was a fan of the Tigers. Then when he goes down there, they love the culture, the diversity around the program, the food. And then Brian Kelly's name is powerful in the state of Michigan for what he did at Grand Valley State, what he did at Central Michigan, and it's certainly what he's just done in his career. And then LSU's track record at the quarterback position recently, 2 Heisman winners, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels. He sees himself being part of that lineage, and he knows there's always going to be wide receivers at LSU year in and year out. The Tigers are stacked at that position. So those are just some of the reasons why he's in the fold for LSU right now.
All right, let's go to the number 3 cornerback in the country, Naim Offord. He's the top player in the state of Alabama, but he committed early to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Now, Naim Offord, Chad, hasn't flipped his commitment anywhere. He's still with Ohio State, but it seems like he's up for grabs right now. Maybe Ohio State should just be noted as the leader at this point. Well, what do you make of his commitment to Ohio State?
I mean, he's still committed. Obviously, nothing, like you said, nothing has changed, at least officially at this time. They're still trying to get him back for, the game against Michigan at the end of November. I mean, he still has communication with that staff from Tim Walton to, up and down the coaching staff there in Columbus. I mean, he's got family in Ohio. There's reasons that he chose Ohio State when he did. Their development, he's close with Devin Sanchez from Texas. Those guys communicate. Those guys talk. But, yeah. Schools aren't giving up. He took the OV to Oregon in June. He was back for a game, obviously, during the season. He's been to Auburn multiple times. He's going to Florida this weekend. Depending, again, who you talk to, how strong he is to Ohio State, I still hear the most about Auburn being that consistent competitor, strong contender against Ohio State, in-state school, close to home. He knows a lot of commitments. He can be a guy there early at cornerback from like day one starting potentially. It's a big need for them in the program. But you cannot sleep ever on Oregon. Dan Lanning and that program, they're going to be right there in this race until the end. And maybe, yes, I hear more about Auburn today, but I hear a lot about Oregon as well, and maybe the least about Ohio State right now. So let's see how all this plays out. We have 3 weeks. At least 3 teams are involved. It'll play out here soon.
Well, he's going to go back up to Ohio State for the Michigan game. The family's relationship with Tim Walton, there's a lot of trust. He can develop him on and off the field. But I ultimately think it will be tough for Ohio State to hang on to Naim Offord. And that's a little bit of a change from what I had been saying recently, talking to the family. It seemed like Ohio State still in pole position. But as this recruitment comes down the home stretch, Oregon, they're certainly heavy-handed in this recruitment. He's been out there a couple times, and Dan Lanning is maybe their favorite coach of the entire process, head coach of the entire process. And then certainly Auburn, he's been to multiple games. He's been to practice on the Plains. They're putting together a really good recruiting class. Florida's going to take their shot this weekend. He's going to be in Gainesville for the LSU game, but Auburn and Oregon remain the biggest challengers to Ohio State. And I think it might be more likely that he ends up at one of those two instead of Ohio State.
Yeah, and I've been following our guys at LettermanRow.com on the On3 Network, and they've kind of been hinting at this along the way that Naim Offord, while committed to Ohio State, should be looked at as a full recruitment going on right now. I mean, Ohio State is in a battle for their 5-star corner. All right, Ohio State fans, let us know how you're feeling. Do you think Naim Offord is going to stick, or will he flip? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, let's talk about elite quarterback Julian Lewis. He's been making the news recently in a couple different ways. One, the first way, you guys put in flip picks for Julian Lewis to flip his commitment from USC to Colorado. We're going to talk about that in a second. But then he kind of threw a curveball at us all with the announcement or with the news that Julian Lewis will visit Georgia this weekend. And we know Georgia is in the market for a second quarterback in this class. They have Ryan Montgomery committed, but they want two. So I'll start with you, Chad. Let's start with the Georgia talk around Julian Lewis, then we'll talk Colorado. But start with, how much of a priority do you think Julian Lewis is right now for Georgia?
Look, Georgia wants to add a second quarterback. There's no doubt about that. Add depth to their room. They're happy with Ryan Montgomery. Unfortunately, towards ACL this season, will be out for the spring, can't compete, can't go through the drills and so on. But they want to add a second piece in Juju. Julian Lewis could be potentially that guy. They've had communication there at one time, very early in the process. They were kind of viewed as a team to beat. He's been there 10-plus times. He knows Coach Bobo extremely well, Gummy extremely well. The relationships are in place. He likes the Georgia offensive scheme. He'll be back in town this weekend. I mean, look, this all kind of came somewhat kind of out of nowhere, I would say, like in recent days. But there's been communication going on behind the scenes between him and Georgia all along, as there have been with other schools as well. So, look, he'll visit this weekend. We'll see what happens coming out of this trip. I think he'll ask some questions to Kirby, to Bobo, watch the team play, talk to some commits, and see how he feels. Yeah.
Talking to Rusty Mansell, you guys can go watch that video on this channel. But Rusty kind of said the same thing. He thinks that this is going to be a real sit-down with Kirby and the coaching staff with Juju to kind of feel what does he want to do? How serious are we taking this? And then we'll move forward from there. So we'll have to see what he's saying coming out of that Georgia visit. But, Steve, I want to go behind the scenes of this Colorado prediction that you guys dropped this week for Juju to take over. Yeah, I mean, right there, handing the keys from Shedeur to Juju. So you guys are predicting that. Take us behind the scenes of that pick.
Well, Colorado was always a legitimate player for Julian Lewis, as he took 3 visits prior to the season to Boulder, got a chance to watch them go through a spring practice, continue to build that relationship with Coach Sanders, Coach Shermer, and the rest of that staff. But I think seeing them on the field this fall, now competing for a college football playoff spot, that validates everything that the coaching staff was saying to Julian before the season about their ambitions. And it's a place that now he can see himself being successful on the field, because look, they were 4-8 the year before, and so now you're competing for a college football playoff. The relationships were always great with Colorado. The vibe, being on campus, being around that coaching staff, he always loved. The offense, he always loved. But how is it going to come together on the field? And now here they are in contention to win the Big 12. So I think more than anything, that has thrusted Colorado into pole position at this point in the process for Julian Lewis. The important factors in his recruitment, in my opinion: where can he play the earliest? Colorado, I think if he picks the Buffaloes, they'll just ride with him and go through any kind of potential growing pains he would have in college as a true freshman starter. And he's probably one of the more ready-made high school quarterbacks to step into a college football program and play. The stage has never been too big for Julian Lewis. Chad and I have had him on our radar since he was in the 7th grade. Got his first offer from Dan Mullen in Florida in 8th grade. Steps into the high school scene in the Peach State, the biggest stage, the biggest classification, goes all the way to the state title game and plays magnificent in the state title game. They came up short, but the stage has never been too big for him. Carrollton's the favorite to win the state championship this year in the Peach State. He's the reigning Gatorade Player of the Year in that state. He is a National Gatorade Player of the Year finalist last year. He's got a chance to put his name alongside some great quarterbacks that have come out of there. Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson come to mind right away. So play right away. NIL, certainly Shedeur Sanders is one of the more well-compensated college athletes in the land, and to play on that stage at Colorado with that following that they have there. Julian Lewis, who's already maybe the highest paid high school athlete currently with his Under Armour deal and some of those other things he's got going on. He could step right in at Colorado and continue to
just keep it rolling.
Yep, no question. He's already got that country club lifestyle ahead of him from a financial standpoint. So the NIL, the opportunity to play right away, and then now be part of a winning football program at Colorado with guys being good players around him. That's, in my opinion, what has put Colorado out in front. But you said curveball for the Georgia visit. Chad and I, we're always looking for a breaking ball when we're in the box talking about Julian Lewis. We know anything can happen at any time. I was not surprised to see that he popped up on the Georgia visit list this weekend. And we'll see how this process continues to go. But I like where Colorado stands. I think USC has already started the process of moving on their end.
Yeah.
And,
seems like the writing's on the wall there. And one of the things I love about Julian Lewis is just his ability, the fact that he's produced at every level. Like you guys said, he was producing in 7th grade, 8th grade. Now he's doing it in high school, and that's going to only continue in the college level. Now, these USC to Colorado flips, this might not be the only one, because offensive tackle Cardale Smith is also trending from USC to Colorado. Chad, you want to talk a little bit about the 6'6", 290-pound offensive tackle from the state of Alabama? He's no stranger to flips. He's already committed to Auburn once, flipped to USC. Now it looks like another one could be imminent.
Yes, he's definitely going down that path, Josh, for sure. I mean, I think Steve mentioned the other day, I mean, pairing him with a guy like Jordan Seaton and building around those guys as anchors on your offensive line. Like you said, a massive kid from southern Alabama, loves to play football. And like Dion said the other day, I think this week, said, if we sign you as a freshman, we sign you to play right away. He would be a guy to slide in, compete for playing time. And he's looking for that opportunity to play. He saw that at Auburn, saw that at USC. He likes the staff, where the program is going under Deion Sanders, and sees that chance to play for a very good program and play early right away for a guy that played in the NFL.
Yeah. All right. Colorado fans, talk to us. Let us know. How are you feeling about these two major flip targets, and Julian Lewis and Cardale Smith? Could it be a 2-for-2 from USC? Let us know. Comment section below. The next name on the list is wide receiver Caleb Cunningham. Now, I put him on the list because at the start of the show he hadn't flipped, but he already has. So cross off that Alabama logo and throw on a Ole Miss one, because the number 2 wide receiver in America has flipped his commitment. All right, we'll move to Deuce Knight next. The number 6 quarterback in America flipped his commitment from Notre Dame to Auburn about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and now Deuce Knight is in flip talks again. This time it's with Ole Miss. Now, Deuce Knight is from the state of Mississippi. He is committed to Auburn. Chad, how are you feeling about this commitment to Auburn? Is it solid?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to put him, like you said, into quote-unquote flip talks just yet. You know, I think obviously Ole Miss is not going to go away. They're not giving up. They have a friend of his, a fellow Mississippian, I guess, Caleb Cunningham, now flipped from Alabama to Ole Miss. Those two were at the game we already mentioned this past weekend. He talks with Charlie Weiss. He talks with Lane Kiffin. He sees the offensive scheme, how Lane has developed quarterbacks in his history as an offensive coordinator and as a head coach as well. It's an in-state program. He knows people there. Like Caleb, he feels at home in Oxford. So, look, I think he's supposed to be back at Auburn next 2 weeks, then maybe in Oxford later this month. I do think at some point this gets a little bit interesting, but right now I think Auburn still feels good about where Deuce is with them. But again, Ole Miss is not going to go away.
Yeah. Steve, we talk a lot of Deuce Knight on this channel, and one of the things about Deuce's recruitment, and we believe in this fully, is following the visits. Now, Deuce has been to Auburn how many times?
He's been to every home game, to my knowledge.
And how many home games have they won?
They
maybe
won the first one.
I think one home game. So he's witnessed a bunch of losses, but in a way, do you think that this could actually help his recruitment to the Tigers?
Well, I think he sees an opportunity to go to Auburn and compete in year one for the starting job. I do expect the Tigers to go to the transfer portal. I think that was one of Hugh Freeze's great regrets coming into the season, is that he did not go into the portal. I think you'll see them go into the portal, but it's still an opportunity if you're QB2 to get on the field, and you're always one play away from being the starter. Certainly in that we saw that with DJ Lagway this year, right? But you want to get a quality quarterback and elder statesman to come in that Deuce can kind of learn under, not be just thrown right into the fire. But I think he loves the way Auburn's been recruiting. Top 10 class last cycle, tracking for a top 10 class this cycle, already in the top 10 in 2026. There is a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement around this Auburn program on the recruiting trail. I know they're not getting the results they're looking for on the field on Saturdays. They've been in every one of those ball games. I think they've had the lead in every one of those ball games. These young guys think they can be the ones to help restore the glory at Auburn. I think Deuce Knight loves the fact that he could be part of some very exciting Auburn quarterback tradition. Guys like Jason Campbell, who I think runs their collective or has something to do with it now. And then you have Cam Newton's legacy there. Guys of that magnitude to add yourself to that kind of Mount Rushmore of Auburn quarterbacks is exciting. But look, he's already flipped once. He has not put down the phone. His family has not put down the phone from Ole Miss. So we'll see what happens. But again, visiting Auburn the next 2 weekends for their next 2 home games, there's a lot of confidence on that side of the coin that he remains in the fold for Auburn as they continue to build and put the finishing touches on one of the best recruiting classes in the land.
Yeah, I agree with that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I kind of feel right now that Ole Miss and Deuce Knight are both feeling each other out. Like neither has really gone all in on. They're still kind of doing the dance. Do you feel that way, or do you think Ole Miss is all in on Deuce Knight?
So he visited Ole Miss at the end of the summer when this all started heating up. When we put out the story that very much probable that he flips to Auburn. He also visited Ole Miss and went in there and had conversations with their coaching staff. And they also talked about what that would look like from an NIL perspective if you're the quarterback at Ole Miss. So those conversations have been happening since July. They're continuing to happen. But as Chad knows and you know, we're getting into the part of the process where it's time to finally put your final opportunities on the table here. And so we're going to see some movement because of that with all kinds of prospects as the 2025 cycle wraps up.
We're not playing games anymore. So Ole Miss fans, Auburn fans, talk to us. How are we feeling about Deuce Knight? Do you guys think he sticks or flips? Let me know. Comment section below. All right, the next big-time target we're talking about is safety Ivan Taylor, top 100 player, number 7 safety in America. And Steve, he's committed to Michigan via Notre Dame because he's already flipped once. But now Ivan Taylor, I mean, this one seems imminent. Tell us where you think he's going to flip to.
Well, Alabama lost Caleb Cunningham earlier today. I think it's only a matter of time before they add Ivan Taylor to their recruiting class. Look, Ivan Taylor, former Notre Dame commit, now committed to Michigan. Alabama and this new coaching staff never went away through either commitments. They've gotten him to campus a few times, most recently for the Georgia game. He said that Bryant-Denny Stadium was shaking. The atmosphere was electric. He loves that coaching staff, feels it's a place that can get the best out of him. The magnitude of playing at Bama, that stage, the competition, I think it's trending heavy for Bama right now, Chad.
I agree. I think also I've heard his dad really loves the Alabama staff, just the pedigree they have from NFL. Coach Mo Linquist being a head coach, NFL stint as well, and from a developmental standpoint. So his dad played in the NFL. He looks for that development, and really for his son to be pushed and coached hard. And he liked the Bama, from what I've heard as well, the Bama angle in this recruiting process.
All right, let's talk about LSU wide receiver Derrik Meadows. Sorry, LSU fans. We got another Tiger on Flip Watch right here. Number 11 wide receiver in America. He's 6'6", 185 pounds. Derrik Meadows is built to play football. Steve, let's start with you. This recruitment came down to three programs, Michigan, Alabama, and LSU. Meadows, kind of a delay in the summer. Do you think that delay is kind of indicative of what's happening right now? Like he was having second thoughts then and he's having second thoughts now?
Well, Notre Dame was the perceived leader for Derrik Meadows for much of his process before LSU grabbed the momentum there at the end of the summer and got him in the fold. I think a great visit to LSU. Again, their receiver track record, the opportunity to be part of a great class with Bryce Underwood, Cortez Hankton. All those things had him obviously leaning LSU at the end of the summer, but now it's dotting I's and crossing T's time in his recruitment. He's always been one of Notre Dame's top targets regardless of position. Him, Madden Faramo, those are two guys that what Notre Dame's always coveted in this cycle. So they went out to Bishop Gorman. They got him to campus last weekend. I heard it was a really good visit. There's some buzz coming out of that visit that they think he's ultimately going to flip. Now to where? Who knows? He was at Michigan 2 weekends ago. His dad's in the Hillsdale Hall of Fame in the state of Michigan for his achievements on the football field. He's been to Michigan a bunch, Coach Moore, Coach Bellamy. If Michigan were to ultimately flip Bryce Underwood, that certainly would help with Derrik Meadows. Other schools trying to get involved. There was a little bit of Texas A&M chatter. I'm not expecting him at Texas A&M this weekend. We'll see how his process continues to go. But Notre Dame and Michigan certainly showed him and his family a good time the last 2 weekends.
All right, let's talk about offensive lineman Solomon Thomas. Now, Solomon Thomas is committed to FSU. He's a 5-star interior offensive lineman, probably the only available 5-star. I think all the other 5-star offensive linemen are pretty much locked into their decisions. But if there's one that could move, it's probably Solomon Thomas. Now, offensive coordinator, offensive line coach Alex Atkins was dismissed on Sunday. And Chad, Solomon Thomas had a great relationship with Alex Atkins. Is this enough to move him off that commitment to the Seminoles? And also, who would you consider the main threats to flip him?
I don't know if it's enough to move him off the commitment to enough to at least open his ears, open the door up more, and take a broader look around, I would say, maybe, and hear people out more. But I still think he still loves FSU for FSU. He still loves and believes in Mike Norvell, the head coach there at Florida State. Yes, Atkins was his guy. He has a great reputation, Atkins does, as far as building relationships and having that camaraderie with his players and his recruits. So that was a big blow, no doubt about that. I know Steve talked with him this week as well. And, I still think he's FSU's to lose, no doubt about that. LSU has always been involved. There was at times this year we thought he would visit LSU for a game. He has a connection there with Brad Davis, the O-line coach in Baton Rouge. I think Florida is working to make a push there to get him on campus as well, and having some communication at different times. Miami has been and has not been involved with Solomon as well. But I think still Florida State is in a pretty good spot to hold on here. Steve?
Yeah, Steve, you got anything?
Yeah, agreed. Florida State's poured a lot into it. Mike Norvell told them that he's going to go out and hire the best offensive line coach, best offensive coordinator in the country. So there's still a lot of trust there. Florida and LSU are the two, he said, if any program could change, if they come correct, that
you got to come correct.
Look, it's all about
business.
Exactly right. And so Florida and LSU are still in the warm department here. But I like him to stick with Florida State as we chat about it today.
Yeah, and I think Solomon Thomas's recruitment right now kind of encapsulates the era that we're in high school recruiting, where Solomon Thomas, he was straight up, he tweeted something about how relationships don't matter at this point, because he said, I had the best relationship with Alex Atkins, and now that he's fired, there's not time for me to build a relationship, so business matters, and if you're going to come, you got to come correct. So, hey, he's just being honest. I mean, hey, that's all you can ask for. Let's talk about edge Jared Smith. Steve, Jared Smith committed to Auburn right here on the On3 Recruits channel. He picked Auburn over South Carolina and a couple others, but it seems like the Gamecocks never went away in this recruitment.
Yeah, Ole Miss being the third school. He was in Oxford last Saturday as Ole Miss trying to rally there with Jared Smith. But Chad and I agree. We think South Carolina is the biggest threat to flip him from Auburn. He is going to be back in Columbia this weekend. And there was a time where I thought that this recruitment would go the same as it did for Dylan Stewart. Like South Carolina, this is their number one player on the board overall. And they went out and got it done with Dylan Stewart. And there was a time where my On3 RPM was on South Carolina for Jared Smith before Auburn wrestled away that momentum and ultimately got him in the fold at the end of summer. Sterling Lucas has been leading this recruitment for South Carolina. Jared Smith visits Auburn in the afternoon. Later that night, South Carolina blows the doors off of Texas A&M in the second half, outscoring them 24-0, getting a huge win. There's a ton of momentum around the program. I know that Jared Smith talked to that South Carolina staff that night and shared in the excitement of that big win for the Gamecocks. He's locked in, coming back this weekend for a big game against Missouri. And Chad, we are keeping a close eye on the Gamecocks for Jared Smith.
This was kind of like, to me, almost like Derrik Meadows coming full circle potentially. We like Notre Dame early with Meadows. He committed to a different school. Could it come back? There's definitely a chance there for the Irish. But yeah, like Steve said, South Carolina, it's real again with South Carolina for Jared Smith. I mean, he's never lost that communication. And Auburn kind of swooped in and kind of changed the narrative pretty quickly here in this race over the summer, getting him on campus for an unofficial in June, grabbed that momentum, got him committed in early August. But South Carolina has never went away. And trust me, he's noticing what Dylan Stewart is doing as a true freshman. He's noticing what Kyle Kennard is doing on the other side, sacking quarterbacks in the SEC. That development, the chance to be that guy again, that edge rush guy for South Carolina, going back, I think shows his hand about just how much interest he has in the Gamecocks. And again, this battle has tightened up. It is real here with 3 weeks to go, and Carolina's a real threat to Auburn.
Chad, let's go a little rogue. Let's go off script on this live show. We're in the flips portion of this live recruiting show we're doing here at the On3 World headquarters here in Nashville. Let's see how producer Trey adjusts to this too. But South Carolina, they're looking for a lot of flips as they try and go 9-3 and squeeze into the college football playoff. Damola Ejidahun, Georgia Tech commit. He's in our top 100 at On3 right now. He's expected back at South Carolina this weekend for a fourth time this fall. And then Kevin Wynn, on 300, defensive lineman, currently committed to Florida State. Now, I've heard Florida State has maybe stemmed those waters a little bit, but I don't trust it as much. USC, I thought he was close to flipping to USC. Now South Carolina looking to flip him and his teammate Stephen Miller, who's committed to USC right now. They could get spatula heavy in Columbia right now. I think that they're trending for Damola. Kevin Wynn, they're right there. Stephen Miller, they're right there. How do you feel about the Gamecocks as they push for what would be a second or third straight top 20 class?
Yeah, I mean, what about Jimmy Bryson, O-lineman, Georgia Tech? Kevin P, O-lineman, Georgia Tech. All these guys.
Two of the three, I think,
there's no doubt. I think, they're very much in it for every kid that you said, Steve. And I think, for me being in Georgia, Damola's from Georgia, Kevin Wynn, Stephen Miller, I think Carolina's in I would say based on what I've picked up the last few days, last week, for Kevin Wynn, I would even lean, he's committed to Florida State. Maybe the team to beat, the hottest team attached to his name is South Carolina. And with him, his close friend and teammate, like you said, USC commit Stephen Miller. Damola, Georgia Tech's doing all they can to hang on here. They had him on campus when they upset Miami this past weekend. He's an in-state kid at Duluth High School. They want to build around him and Josh Petty at offensive tackle in the future on the flats under the O-line head coach Brent Key. They're working hard to keep him. He could be back at Ohio State on November 30th for the big game against a team up north as well. So Ohio State's involved, but Carolina's in a great spot, as you say, to take your phrase, spatula season, Steve. They're in the thick of it for quite a few big names.
All right, let's finish this segment up with talking about running back Anthony Rogers. Anthony Rogers committed to Alabama, but has been spending a good amount of time in Columbus. Chad Simmons, running back Anthony Rogers. Do you think a flip is going to happen here with the Ohio State Buckeyes?
I would guess a flip happened, yes. I would lean Ohio State for sure. I don't think he's expected as of now. Things can always change to end up in the Alabama class. He's the one guy that stayed over from Nick Saban's recruiting class to Kalen DeBoer. There was talk about him taking an OV to Alabama this coming weekend. That will not take place.
Okay.
He will not be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. He's mentioned maybe going back to Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl at the end of the month. But he has a great connection with Carlos Loughlin at Ohio State. He was there. He had a very good official visit. I think both Steve and I both had communication with him there about the visit. Things went really well. He had a great time there earlier in the spring as well. I think things are trending. He would be the third back for Ohio State. I think they're just trending that direction for the Buckeyes right now. Yeah, they want that guy. And he visited Georgia as well earlier this season. I don't think Georgia's as involved now as they once were. So I think Ohio State's in a great spot to flip him from Alabama.
Georgia may be hoping to flip Jamarian Morrow from Missouri. He's visiting this weekend, on 300 running back that was highly coveted by several SEC programs, Texas A&M being another. Just we could talk flips all day. It's going to be a wild 3 weeks here down the stretch.
Well, let's do it. It's only noon. We could go another 8 hours here talking flip targets. What do you say? No. All right. You guys let us know. Comment section below. We just hit on the major flip targets that we're tracking. Who are you watching, and where do you think some of these guys are going to land? Let us know. Comment section below. All right, let's take a look at those top 25 rankings because the race for the number one class in America is on. And during this show, we just saw a flip of number 1 and 2. Alabama was number 1 when we started this show. About 20 minutes in, Caleb Cunningham flips that commitment to Ole Miss. Ole Miss now at 17, but Ohio State now has the number 1 class in America. Let's start with Alabama's class. They're ranked number 2. They got a couple 5-stars committed in Ty Haywood, Keelan Russell, Michael Carroll, and Dijon Lee. Not far behind 5-star status. You also have A.K. Deere and Jackson Lloyd. Why do we love Alabama's class, Chad?
To me, I love it in the trenches, man. You start with that offensive line. You mentioned Jackson Lloyd, Ty Haywood, Mal Waldrop, an Alabama legacy kid. Micah DeBose, a one-time Georgia commit.
Michael Carroll.
Michael Carroll, who's been demolishing guys down at IMG this fall. But for me, that's where it starts, man. I love the offensive line group, the first full group for Kalen DeBoer and that staff at Alabama. Keelan Russell, major playmaker, an elite guy, fun to watch, could be a future star in Tuscaloosa. But for me, what stands out the most is that O-line group where it all starts in the trenches, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, Keelan Russell over the last 2 seasons has completed over 72% of his passes, playing against some of the best high school football competition in the country. They have a chance to win the national championship this year as well. Keelan Russell's thrown 40 touchdowns as a senior. How many interceptions has he thrown? 0. Threw just 3 interceptions.
Gotta love that ratio.
Just threw 3 interceptions as a junior. So he's got 75 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. Just 3 interceptions. He is mobile. He was committed to SMU at one point. His ambition in college is to win the Heisman Trophy. And he is not afraid to put that out there. Alabama, in his opinion, was his best opportunity to go win the Heisman Trophy. He wants to play on that stage with those caliber of teammates for that coaching staff, Kalen DeBoer and company. He saw what they did with Michael Penix, getting the best out of him. First at Indiana, where Kalen DeBoer was his offensive coordinator. Penix follows him to Washington. Obviously turns into a top 10 pick, plays in the national title game. Keelan Russell wants to take it a step further, wants to win the title, wants to win the Heisman Trophy. And you look at the way he's closing his high school career, he has gotten better from sophomore to junior year, took another leap here as a senior, playing his best football yet. And along with that offensive line, if you got the offensive line, you got the quarterback, you're going to be very, very, very competitive. And Alabama, the way they've recruited both those positions this cycle, takes a backseat to nobody.
Okay. So Alabama in the hunt for the number 1 class, but maybe, I don't know if they necessarily have the firepower on the board to regain that number 1 status. We'll see what happens here. We talk about flip targets. There's a bunch of them out there. Alabama has a real shot at number 1, but the team that we're going to talk about next, the Georgia Bulldogs, I think maybe has the inside track. Even though they're not number 1 right now, Ohio State is, but they might have the inside track. They have some really, really good commitments, especially in the trenches. You got Elijah Griffin and Isaiah Gibson, 2 of the best defensive linemen in America. Isaiah Gibson being recruited as an edge. Elijah Griffin is the number 1 defensive lineman in America. Pair them with Zayden Walker, Elias Williams. This class is just loaded, and there could be more to come. I'm talking about Justice Terry, the 5-star defensive lineman. Chad, do you think that Georgia has what it takes to finish number 1 overall?
Yes. Does that work?
They will finish number 1.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think
they're going to finish number 1.
They had the best, I think, path to get to number 1 in this class. With the 5-star plus D lineman Justice Terry being that guy, and like Steve says, spatula season. They're trying to. They would love to flip a guy like Christian Gash from Tennessee, a top linebacker guy, Travis Smith. But for me, with Georgia, where it really starts in this class, yes, they do have a path to number 1, but how strong Kirby has gone in that staff in state this year with Elijah Griffin, Zayden Walker, flipping C.J. Wiley. They love to flip Travis Smith from Tennessee, an in-state kid as well. Thomas Blackshear, Savannah kid.
Kevin Wynn? Is Kevin Wynn on the radar?
Kevin Wynn is definitely on their radar.
No question.
That they would love to flip him as well. They're battling against South Carolina, Florida State, some others there as well. But he's definitely in play. So they will add pieces to this class.
Right.
They will flip somebody from somebody else late in the process. I think they land Justice Terry as well.
Yeah, and I think they also land on 300 edge rusher Chase Linton. You agree there, Chad?
Commits soon, yeah.
Tavian Wallace is a linebacker recruit that they haven't gone away on currently.
I forgot that name. He committed to Arkansas over Georgia, so maybe
Florida
Georgia
State.
and Florida State.
Yeah.
So maybe Georgia double backs on him.
Well, he's expected on campus this weekend for
boy.
the Tennessee game. Look, they're trying to poke away at that Tennessee class. Austin Price texted me during the show saying that Lagonza Shady Hayward told him that he is not going to visit Georgia this weekend. Tennessee was hoping to get all 3 in-state Tennessee recruits on campus. Travis Smith told me he will be there.
Oh, wow.
Christian Gass, this would be a return visit to campus. Georgia absolutely covets Christian Gass. Tennessee doing all the right things in that recruitment. You got Zach Staskowski visiting this weekend. He is committed to Washington. His recruitment is really heated up with Oregon, Michigan, and now Georgia trying to make a move there. And then what do they do at quarterback? Jaron Key Sagapolatelli was going to visit this weekend. He's got a playoff game, so he's going to be there next weekend for the UMass game. And I kind of like that for Georgia in that recruitment because there's going to be a lot of prospects on campus this weekend and certainly an opportunity for him to get to between the hedges and see that kind of atmosphere after visiting Oregon would have been big. But he'll get a lot more quality time, I think, next weekend with Kirby Smart and company. Chad and I like the way that one's trending for Oregon right now, but Georgia's going to get a shot. He's committed to Cal. There'll be some I's to dot and T's across in that recruitment from a business standpoint. So we'll see what happens with Jaron Key Sagapolatelli, the all-time leading passer in Hawaii history. He is closing in on the touchdown record as well. They're in on a lot of potential flip targets down the stretch. They've been the favorite to finish number 1 for a second year in a row for a while. I think they ultimately get it done, and it starts with those 2 in-state D linemen in Justice Terry and Chase Linton.
All right, so an elite class has a chance to get even better and finish number 1. Georgia fans, talk to us. Do you think this is the number 1 class in America? Let us know, comment section below. All right, the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're going to talk about Buckeye recruiting right now because they are currently, with the flip of Caleb Cunningham to Ole Miss, Ohio State has overtaken Alabama for the number 1 class in America. The only question I have is, can they hold on? They got some really good commitments in this class. And we start with quarterbacks Tavian St. Clair, Devin Sanchez, Naim Offord, Riley Pettijohn out of the state of Texas, Carter Lowe, just to name a few. Chad, Ohio State currently in that number 1 spot, but do they have enough remaining on the board to hold on to the number 1 spot?
Yeah, I just feel like Georgia has more room to add pieces than Ohio State. They have, I think, 26 commits right now. They want to hang on, obviously, to every one of those, including Naim Offord, who we talked about before, being, Auburn, Oregon involved there as well. But there's still some pieces out there. I mean, Demola, an elite offensive tackle. They're working with maybe Flip Turbo, Anthony Rogers from Alabama.
5-star Jaem Stewart.
Jaem Stewart obviously is the biggest piece.
That could be
there.
the piece. If Ohio State was to finish number 1 overall, they got to land Jaem Stewart.
Right?
They
have to hang on to Naim Offord and land Jaem Stewart, or I don't think they will have enough juice to beat Georgia.
There's a path, but I think Georgia has more room to add key, higher-rated pieces than them, at this point.
Yeah,
and they're more likely to hang on to all their high-rated pieces, where Naim Offord's recruitment is still in a little bit of flux right now. But Jaem Stewart very much could end up at Ohio State. Has that they get the last visit the weekend of the 30th.
Right.
And we saw Ohio State close strong last cycle, keeping Jeremiah Smith in the fold, keeping Edric Houston in the fold. So I think that they will be equipped to go to battle for Jaem Stewart at the end with Oregon and LSU, and they get the last visit. And for Jaem Stewart, he sees himself playing in the biggest games, being up for the biggest awards in college football. In Larry Johnson, what he's been able to do with 5 stars, those 5 stars, they play like 5 stars in college under Larry Johnson and company. Ohio State, there is consistent a program of being in that top 5, being in that college football playoff discussion as anybody. And so they check a lot of boxes for Jaem Stewart. And then his relationships with Coach LaAllen Clark and Coach Larry Johnson, second to none. So they're in a good spot for Jaem Stewart. We'll see if they can get it done, but they got to hang on to Naim Offord as well, or they're not going to finish number one.
Yeah. And so Ohio State fans, talk to us. The path to the number one class is there. Do you guys think the Buckeyes finish number 1, 2, or 3? Let us know. Comment section below. Now, there's one team out there that I would consider a sleeper to finish number 1. They're currently sitting outside the top 5 at number 7, and that's the Oregon Ducks, already loaded at the top of this class with number 1 wide receiver DeCorian Moore, 5-star wide receiver Dallas Wilson, 5-star Trey McNutt, cornerback Brandon Finney and Dorian Brew, just to name a few. The Oregon Ducks, though, they are sitting outside the top 5, but Chad, there is a path for them to potentially finish number 1 overall.
Yeah, I mean, we've just talked about Jaem Stewart. You know, I'll let Steve pronounce the quarterback's name,
Jaron Key Sagapulatelli.
Yeah, I don't want to butcher that up. You do a good job.
Don't be scared, Chad. Don't
jump
be
in the water head
scared.
first,
obviously, hey, they're also involved with a guy like Caleb Burns, linebacker from Houston, Texas, committed to Baylor right now. He's kind of been trending that direction since the OV back in September. They're not going away with Lincoln Cure as well, an elite tight end from Kansas who is likely to visit Eugene again one more time to make sure if he wants to stay with K-State or flip to Oregon. But, yeah, they're very much in play to make a big push, big move in these final few weeks.
The thing about Oregon, Josh and Chad, is that they have the 3 5-stars, DeCorian Moore, LSU trying to make a late push there, but I like him to stick with Oregon. Dallas Wilson, all those in-state programs have been on Dallas Wilson, but we still like him to stick with Oregon there. Another 5-star. Then Trey McNutt, he's been locked in. Jaron Key Sagapulatelli, Jaron Key Sagapulatelli. Excuse me. It's Jaron, not Jaron.
We thought the last name was.
See, I didn't.
We were going to get caught up.
That's why I didn't dive in.
The first name.
That's why.
Yeah, so it's Jaron. He is a guy that could ultimately finish as a 5-star. And if Oregon lands him, that's a 5-star quarterback coming into their class. That certainly makes them a sleeper to finish number 1. Lincoln Cure out there. He's the number 1 tight end right now per the On3 industry player rankings. So there is definitely Jaem Stewart, 5-star. They have the guys on the board.
There's firepower out
to
there.
Finish number 1.
Right.
And as we kind of talk it out loud here, if we think Oregon leads for Jaron, if we think that they lead for Jaem, I think if I'm not a math major. Yeah, they could flip Naim Offord. Maybe they're the favorites. I'm over here ringing the bell for Georgia. Like, we got Oregon listed as a sleeper. I'm talking it out loud here. I'm doing the math over here. I mean, they could finish number 1. They was a top 5 class last year.
They also got to play a little defense. One of their top 5 rated players, Brandon Finney, right there, the number 5 cornerback in America, number 51 overall, borderline 5-star.
Yeah.
You guys are predicting him to flip to Penn State.
I mean, they're playing defense on all 3 of those guys.
Yeah, they really are.
On 3 of the 4, but yeah.
But that's Oregon. You know, hey, Oregon's going to take some
recruiting.
big swings, and they're gonna flirt with these supermodels, and sometimes you might get burned a little bit.
I think Finney's probably trending away, at this point, But one thing about this class, just what they have right now, I see is like flash and excitement. Like I love the DeCorian Moore. I mean, kind of a sexy receiver. Trey McNutt, super confident, that swag. Dorian Brew, all about business, wants to hit somebody, make plays. Just looking up and down. Then Dallas Wilson, kind of a man in his own world down there in Tampa, Florida, his own swag, his own personality. I look up and down this commitment list. I just see excitement, flash, swag. It kind of fits that Oregon, that Nike brand. If they can add guys, Naim Offord, Jaem Stewart, Jaron, the quarterback from Hawaii. Jaron
Key Sagapulatelli.
So add those guys, it gets that much more sexy in the end.
I'm in on Oregon being the favorite to finish number 1. The more that we kind of rip and roar right now.
All we had to do is talk through it, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're doing here on the On3 Recruits channel. And it's the best recruiting discussion that you're going to find on the web. So make sure you're hitting like and subscribe for the inside scoop, the Simmons scoop, the Wilt Fong whip around. Live commitments are going to be on the On3 Recruits channel as we come down the stretch. So you're going to want to be locked in on all the best recruiting information. You're not going to find this kind of discussion anywhere else.
Only here, only on the On3 Recruits channel. Smash that subscribe button for me. All right. Let's wrap this thing up and talk a couple more teams that we did not hit on. We got to talk Tennessee recruiting, right? The Vols are sitting at number 8 in the country, headlined with David Sanders Jr. And Tennessee fans got to love that we got through our Flip Watch segment without putting David Sanders Jr. He has been rock solid in that commitment that he made to the Vols in August, and he headlines a great class for Tennessee, but they're looking to push to the top 5, couple big names on the board, and a couple guys they got to hold on to as well. Steve, do you think Tennessee has a shot at a top 5 class in 2025?
Well, I think that for Tennessee, you're excited about the way that they're recruiting this cycle because they are addressing positions of need, recruiting at a high level at positions of strength, right? Their defensive line has been one of the most dominant ones in college football. I think that if they landed some guys that can maintain that standard, if you can go out and add Isaiah Campbell to it, which we think they will as of right now, North Carolina lingers, that'll be big for them.
Chad, Isaiah Campbell, one of the best available, if not the best available defensive lineman in America, right outside the top 30, borderline 5-star. So do you think that this is a class that to me, it has kind of the makings of a number 1 class. You know what I mean? But to be sitting outside the top 8, I mean, Tennessee fans have to be thrilled with what's coming in right now, even if they don't add any more pieces.
Oh, there's no doubt. And we think they will add. That's the thing about,
right.
They'd have to, I think, somewhat of an upset if North Carolina comes back and swoops in late and takes Isaiah Campbell away from Tennessee. But looking at this class, I mean, I love, obviously, it starts with the headliner, David Sanders, offensive tackle. You have, in-state quarterback, George McIntyre.
Oh, how could we not? I mean, George is responsible for this class, even though we don't have him on top commits. George McIntyre probably recruited this class just as much or more than Josh Heupel has.
George McIntyre and Bryce Underwood were the 2 quarterbacks in this class initially that had the opportunity to go anywhere they wanted to go. No other quarterback in 2025 had that ticket. If George McIntyre wanted to commit to Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Michigan, he could have. He chose to stay in state, play at Tennessee. They've recruited that position at a high level. He was their target in that class. They have Faison Brandon coming in behind him. They're hitting on all the right positions. David Sanders, the offensive line is coming together. The way they've recruited in the front 7, the way Tim Banks has turned that defense around. They went from being a Swiss cheese defense to one of the more ferocious defenses in the country. Guys like Christian Gass, Lagonza Shady Hayward, those are guys that can keep maintaining that level of play on the defensive side of the ball. And then Marion Dye, he is a project. He might be the biggest project in the SEC, but there's nobody prettier. There's nobody with more traits than Marion Dye. And if it comes together for him at Tennessee, he is going to be a phenomenal player up front for them as well. And then Deshaun Brame, that's one of the more impressive recruiting wins, right, Chad?
That was huge. He went back and forth the first time, and Tennessee one day, 1 hour, Oregon the next, then obviously stayed and went with Tennessee. Adding to what Steve said, I mean, Dye is in his state of Indiana. I love what Tennessee did in my state of Georgia with Travis Smith, Christian Gass, Lagonza Hayward, Justin Baker. Those guys, all 4, are football players that can make plays in the SEC.
Chad, you mentioned those 4 guys that they landed out of Georgia this year. Last year, they went into the Peach State, and they got Mike Matthews, 5-star wide receiver. How does Tennessee have so much success in the state of Georgia?
I mean, they got to recruit neighboring states. I mean, they want to keep the top kids in Nashville, Knoxville, Memphis at home, at Tennessee without question. But Georgia's just a short drive down 75 from Knoxville to Atlanta. 3.5 hours to get into that metropolis area, the Atlanta suburban, and get to those kids at Grayson or Gwinnett County, Cobb County, Marietta. And they recruit, man. One thing I can say about this staff that I hear a ton from top recruits is Josh Heupel is as hands-on as any head coach in America about texting, calling, being consistent, asking about the family, checking in with mom, dad, grandma. These kids love that. Yes, we talk about NIL and all the changes in recruiting now, but at the root of it, there's still a lot of relationships to be built that mean something to these kids in recruiting decisions. And Heupel and that staff is great at what they do there.
No question. Their NIL, their infrastructure is second to none in college football. But those relationships, they were on David Sanders Jr. in 8th grade. They were one of the first programs to prioritize the number 1 offensive tackle in the land. Peach State recruiting Jaden Harmon out of Rome, that new age linebacker, that 6'1", 205-pound space eater that can cover, that can erase mismatches, that can come and blitz. He's got a full tool bag. We like him a lot. Redarius Jackson was a massive in-state win for them out of Memphis. He's one of the more dynamic guys in the country. So again, Tennessee, they went from a program that was mediocre for so many years after they won that national championship with T. Martin and company. The Phil Fulmer years long gone. They are now a program that is going to be competing annually for college football playoffs, and it's because of the way that they've recruited and developed their programs. They are not a transfer portal creation there at Tennessee. Recruit and development and scheme, they are hitting it on all cylinders, and then they have the infrastructure to be competitive with the top recruits in the country.
Well, Tennessee fans currently sitting at number 8 in the On3 industry recruiting rankings, but top 5 is possible. Let us know how you're feeling about this Tennessee Vols recruiting class. All right, let's talk a little Florida Gator recruiting. Why don't we? It seems like we haven't really talked a whole lot of Gators recruiting, maybe because of the way their season went, but they did have that massive visit weekend to start the season against the Miami Hurricanes, and it looks like this weekend, Steve, they're pushing all their recruiting chips again to the middle, and they're going to try to take a big swing at some big-time targets. You were able to confirm a surprise 5-star just a couple minutes before the show started that will be in Gainesville this weekend. Go ahead and tell us about it.
Yeah, DJ Pickett, LSU commit, going to be inside the swamp to watch LSU play on the road against Florida, and things have really started picking up for Florida on the trail after the administration gave the vote of confidence publicly that Billy Napier will be back coaching this football team next year, because obviously their opposition on the trail, we're using that as ammunition against Florida. Will that coaching staff be there? They got the young quarterback, DJ Lagway. He is engaging. There's nobody with the personality, charisma, and talent that you would want as the face of your program moving forward than a DJ Lagway type player. So that's huge. People want to play with him. And then you get the vote of confidence for Billy Napier. They're going to get a lot of support in the NIL arena. Now they're ready to go out there and try and close this recruiting cycle strong. And it starts with a big game against LSU. They're going to get some key players back from the injured list against LSU. I think that they match up well with the Tigers. So this could be a heck of a football game. They didn't play the way they wanted to play on the road at Texas last week, but they had a walk-on quarterback out there. I think we're going to see Florida play like they did on the road against Tennessee, the way they battled Georgia into the fourth quarter. They're a dangerous football team. They're putting a lot into this game. If they play well, there's going to be a lot of terrific players in attendance. Tramel Jones Jr., quarterback, currently committed to Florida State, 4-star for the On3 industry. I think he's on flip watch right now to go from Florida State to Florida. They're bringing in his teammate at Jacksonville Mandarin, 5-star receiver Jamie French. Chad, there's some buzz on Jamie French that it's ultimately more likely he stays in state than signs with Texas. So you got Miami and you got Florida battling for Jamie French. What are you hearing on French going into his visit with Florida this week?
Yeah, I think there's still some confidence at Texas they can keep him in this class. I mean, they've been involved with him. Goes back to the spring, that first time getting mom and dad on campus, Jamie as well. But like you said, Florida's not going away, getting him on campus this weekend for an OV, a full weekend spent in Gainesville. Miami, he's been there numerous times. Kevin Beard, that staff, not going away at Miami. For me, with Florida, it's about, number one, retain who you have committed and add. You know, you've got to add guys, but you got to, number one, start with retaining a guy like Ben Hanks, Florida legacy. Miami's definitely continued to pursue the elite cornerback from down in South Florida. Jalen Wiggins, an elite in-state D lineman, just took an OV up to Notre Dame. The Irish are a threat to the Gators here. Jeremiah McLeod, a D lineman that played football in Florida at one time. He's back in South Georgia. Georgia's a threat to Florida for Jeremiah McLeod. I think the leader of this class is as locked in as can be, and that's Vernell Brown III, one of my favorite probably recruits to cover in this class. About as class act as they come, super talented. He's a Gator through and through, and he'll be back there this weekend. He'll be in his buddy Jamie French's ear. He'll be there with other guys that are committed, DJ Pickett and so on. Vernell Brown is like a walking ambassador for the University of Florida.
Yeah.
And he'll be a playmaker in the swamp and a leader of this class that will catch many touchdowns from DJ Lagway.
The trenches is going to be a major point of emphasis for Florida down the stretch, in addition to Tremel Jones, who they're obviously working to flip at the quarterback position. Joseph Mbachu is visiting this weekend.
One-time commit.
Florida
Fresh
commit.
off his decommitment from the University of Florida.
Right. We like Auburn there right now, but we'll see if they can rekindle the old magic with him. You like Auburn still too, right?
Like Auburn,
yeah,
yeah.
we like Auburn. I say we. I want to make sure we're we because things are always fluid here. Daniel Pierre-Louis, an offensive lineman committed to Florida State that's going to visit this weekend. I think that there's some growing confidence that the Gators could flip him as
Could the
well.
Gators get involved in another FSU offensive lineman in 5-star interior offensive lineman Solomon Thomas? Do you think there's a chance we could see him pop up this weekend?
They're alive. I don't know if he's going to pop up there this weekend, but they're alive in that recruitment.
Okay.
Chad and I like him to stick with Florida State right now, but Florida and LSU contenders there. Stephon Shivers is a massive defensive tackle that at one point was committed to Georgia. He's got some developmental upside. He is a take at Florida. Vanderbilt's had some buzz, but he's going to visit Florida this weekend. I think that's starting to shape up nicely for the Gators there. Ziari Addison's a coveted in-state offensive lineman committed to Oregon that they're going to swing on. Myron Charles is a player that they're going to try and make a final push for on 300 defensive lineman committed to Texas. Tavares Dice, offensive lineman committed to Auburn. Chad, they like this. They like this kid from your state out of Atlanta committed to Cincinnati, Jahari Medlock. So they got some guys that they're really sinking their teeth into here down the stretch. But it's a big opportunity on the field.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this game could mean a lot to Florida's class and how they finish. If they can find a way to beat LSU at home in front of these recruits, you have the vote of confidence with Billy Napier. You wipe the taste out of your mouth of the Texas game. I think
a win goes a long way.
Exactly right. Like I don't normally get caught up in wins and losses, but for some reason this game just seems like it means a lot.
I think
with
it's because
3 weeks to go.
you take the note that they put out last week with the confidence in Billy Napier, and then you couple that with a win at home over LSU, and you're going to see some results in recruiting. Now, if they don't beat LSU, I don't think they're going to lose anybody. It's not going to break their class, but I feel like a win over LSU goes a long way with a majority of the kids you just mentioned.
Absolutely.
All right, Florida Gator fans, you talk to us. Tell us this class has slid outside the top 20, but it has a great chance to finish strong. Let us know who you want to see the Gators finish with. Comment section below. All right, let's talk about the number 24 ranked class in the country. Steve, this is right up your alley. We're talking Nebraska Cornhuskers, and Nebraska had some ups and downs on the trail, but they look like they're gearing up for a big finish.
Well, Malcolm Simpson, they're going to have to battle to hang on to. I hate to start with the bad news, but USC is right there for Malcolm Simpson coming down the stretch. Chad Simmons leading the reporting charge on Dawson Merritt being on flip watch from Alabama to Nebraska. Dawson Merritt going to visit the Huskers for their next home game per our colleague Chad Simmons. What is it, in your opinion, that has Nebraska trending here late for Merritt?
Relationships, path to the field, upside of the program, staying closer to home. I think those are four things that, he's a believer. He always has been, even committed to Alabama, a believer of Matt Rule. He likes that. I mean, Rule was there to see him play. They've always laid out their plan of how, hey, we'll you come here, we'll move you around outside, inside, show your athleticism, versatility, making to an NFL pros prospect one day. But I think it just comes down to that just persistence of Nebraska that put them still knocking on the door late in this process, trying to get him away from Alabama.
Yeah, Matt Rule recently was out to watch Dawson Merritt play. Chase Lofton's a 4-star in-state tight end that Nebraska's trying to chip away at Florida State on, Mizzou, Texas A&M, a couple of others involved. That is not a lock to flip to Nebraska, but there is confidence around Lincoln that they can ultimately get Chase Lofton done. Cortez Mills, we haven't talked about him in a while, Chad, but I'm told Nebraska's still in the hunt for Cortez Mills, committed to Oklahoma. He visited Nebraska for the Colorado game. And the reason why I bring that up is because Brent Venables, Dabo Sweeney always had the rule, if you're committed, you don't take a visit or you're out. This is the one that's kind of defied that. He is still in the fold for Oklahoma.
To the credit of that rule, it came at a time when Clemson was winning a whole lot of ball games.
No question.
And I don't know if that rule is as effective with the season that Oklahoma's having.
Well,
And to that point, Steve, that's the same game that Dawson Merritt was at when he's committed to Alabama.
Yep.
We see now where we think that path is going to eventually flipping to Nebraska. Could Cortez, who's at that same game, end up in the same place in Lincoln, Nebraska?
Aiden Manutai is a safety from Hawaii that's committed to Cal that Nebraska is very much alive for. And then obviously the big fish is Michael Terry III, number 1 ranked athlete per the On3 industry rankings from San Antonio. Coach Rule, Coach McGuire recently went and saw him last week at his school. They envision Terry being a playmaker in a variety of ways in their offense, and they love Coach McGuire. Now, my On3 RPMs with Texas, I'm still on the Longhorns, but Nebraska has a pulse in that recruitment. It looks like that was the one where he wanted to decide before his senior season. He's probably one that goes to the end now in Michael Terry, and it's Nebraska trying to challenge the Longhorns.
Well, Nebraska fans, talk to us. It looks like Matt Rule is setting up for a big finish on the recruiting trail. Season's been up and down, but recruiting is heating up. Talk to us in the comment section below about this 2025
Talk to
recruiting
us about
class.
Dana Holgerson, too. Is
And
that
Dana
offense
Holgerson.
going to heat up this week?
Let's
with
get
him
it going.
calling the plays?
We're cranking it up with Dana Holgerson calling the plays. Nebraska fans, comment section below, talk to us. All right, that's it for today's show. We are 3 weeks from signing day, so we wanted to sit down and just get you guys up on all things recruiting with the 2 best recruiting insiders in the country. Thank you to Steve Wiltfong, and thank you to Chad Simmons. There you have it. We will be back tomorrow for the Wiltfong Whip Around. I almost forgot what day of the week it was. We will be back tomorrow for the Wiltfong Whip Around. I'll have the inside scoop on Sunday. And just 3 weeks from today, we'll be back at this desk for National Signing Day. We will see you guys soon.